Every great victory begins long before anyone ever sees it. Before the success, before the breakthrough, before the dream comes to pass, there's a season of preparation. A time when nothing appears to be happening. It is in these unseen moments, in the quiet struggles, in the hidden battles, that true victory is forged. Think about an athlete preparing for a championship. The crowd sees the moment of triumph, the medals, the celebration. But what they don't see are the early mornings, the late nights, the sacrifices, the hours of training when no one is watching. The real victory isn't won on the field. It's won in the unseen places of discipline, persistence, and preparation. In life, it's easy to focus on what is visible. The results, the rewards, the recognition. But those things are simply the fruit of what was cultivated in the dark. A tree's strength isn't found in its branches, but in its roots, deep underground where no one can see. The taller the tree, the deeper the roots must go. Before anything great rises, it must first be established in the unseen. When you're working hard but not seeing results, when you're believing but nothing is changing, when you're pushing forward but the breakthrough hasn't come yet, that's when you have to remember that victory always starts beneath the surface. The moments of silence, the seasons of waiting, the struggles that no one else knows about, those are the places where strength is built, where faith is tested, where character is refined. Look at the story of David. Before he ever stood before Goliath, before he became king, he was tending sheep in the fields. No one saw him when he was fighting off lions and bears. No one was there when he was alone, worshiping God in the wilderness. But those unseen moments of faithfulness were preparing him for the giant he would one day defeat. His victory didn't start on the battlefield. It started in the unseen places of discipline, preparation, and trust. Sometimes the unseen season feels like a delay, but it's really a foundation. If God gave you the victory too soon, you might not be ready to sustain it. The waiting is not wasted. It is working for you. The struggle is not pointless. It is positioning you. Every great achievement, every answered prayer, every breakthrough follows this same pattern. First, the roots grow before the branches appear. First, the seed is buried before the harvest comes. First, the unseen work is done before the victory is revealed. And just because no one sees it yet, doesn't mean it's not happening. There will be moments in life when everything around you feels uncertain, when the answers don't come, when the doors don't open, when the path ahead seems covered in shadows. It's easy to assume that because you are in a dark season, you have been forgotten, abandoned, or defeated. But the presence of darkness is not the absence of progress. Just because you don't see the way forward doesn't mean one isn't being prepared. Darkness is not defeat. It is often the place where the greatest transformations happen. A seed, when planted, is buried in the ground. It is covered, hidden, surrounded by darkness. From the outside, it appears lifeless, as if nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, a process is unfolding. The outer shell begins to break. Roots start to push downward. A foundation is being laid. If the seed had emotions, it might think, why is this happening to me? Why am I stuck in this place? But that moment in the soil is not the end, it is the beginning of new life. Many people mistake the dark seasons of life as signs of failure. When the relationship falls apart, when the career feels stagnant, when the dreams seem out of reach, the temptation is to give up, to believe that nothing good can come from this place. But the most powerful victories often emerge from the most difficult battles. The darkest nights are what make the sunrise so beautiful. The struggles that seem overwhelming today are shaping the strength you'll need for tomorrow. Think about Joseph. He had a dream of greatness, a vision of leading and influencing nations. But before he ever stepped into that destiny, he went through years of darkness. betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned. If you looked at any one of those moments, you might have thought his story was over. But what looked like defeat was really preparation. The prison was not the end of his story, it was the pathway to the palace. God does his best work in the unseen places. The seasons that feel like setbacks are often setups for something greater. The delay is not denial. The hardship is not the final chapter. The silence does not mean nothing is happening. Just as a diamond is formed under pressure, just as gold is refined in the fire, you are being shaped, strengthened, and prepared in ways you may not understand yet. The enemy wants you to believe that darkness means defeat, that silence means you've been abandoned, that struggle means you're losing. But the truth is, what looks like a breakdown is often the beginning of a breakthrough. You may not see it yet, but the light is coming. The darkness is temporary. And when the time is right, what has been growing in the unseen will be revealed. Faith is easy when everything is going right, when prayers are answered, doors are opening, and life is moving forward without resistance. But true faith is not built in the easy seasons. It is strengthened in the dark. It's in the moments of uncertainty, in the seasons of waiting, in the times when nothing makes sense. That's where real faith grows. Think about a tree. When storms come, the wind beats against it, the rain pounds down, and it looks like the tree is being shaken. But beneath the surface, something powerful is happening. The roots are growing deeper. The pressure from the storm forces the tree to strengthen its foundation, making it even more unshakable when the next storm comes. The same is true for faith. If life were always easy, if everything fell into place instantly, there would be no reason for faith to grow. The Bible is filled with stories of people who developed their faith in the dark. Joseph had a dream of leadership, but before he stepped into that promise, he spent years in slavery and prison. David was anointed king, yet he spent years running for his life before he ever sat on the throne. Even Jesus, before his greatest moment of victory, endured the darkness of the cross. Each of them had to walk through seasons where nothing looked like it was going to change. But it was in those places that their faith was refined, strengthened, and prepared for the blessing ahead. When you can't see the way forward, when you don't feel God's presence, when the promise seems far away, that's when faith is activated. Faith isn't about seeing, it's about trusting. It's about believing that even when the answer hasn't come yet, even when the situation hasn't shifted, even when the breakthrough seems impossible, God is still working. A seed must be planted in the dark before it grows. The roots must push through the soil before the sprout reaches the surface. Just because you don't see immediate results doesn't mean nothing is happening. In fact, the longer the roots take to grow, the stronger the plant will be when it finally breaks through. You may be walking through a season where you don't understand why things are taking so long, why doors remain closed, why prayers seem unanswered, but this is not the time to shrink back. It's the time to press forward in faith. What looks like a delay is actually a setup. What feels like silence is really preparation. Faith is not built in the absence of challenges. It is built in the presence of them. And every dark season is an opportunity for your faith to grow stronger than ever before. It's easy to get so caught up in the struggles of today that you forget the greatness of what's ahead. Challenges can feel overwhelming. Setbacks can feel permanent, and delays can make you question whether the promise will ever come to pass. But no struggle is greater than the future God has prepared for you. What you are facing right now may be difficult, but it is not the end of your story. Your future is bigger than your struggle. There are times in life when it feels like nothing is happening. You've prayed, you've believed, you've done everything you know to do, but the situation hasn't changed. The door hasn't opened. The breakthrough hasn't come. It's in these moments that doubt tries to creep in, whispering, maybe it's never going to happen. Maybe God has forgotten about you. But just because you can't see anything happening doesn't mean God isn't working. He is always moving, orchestrating things in the unseen, setting up what He has already promised you. Think about a stage play. When you're in the audience, you only see what's happening on the stage. The actors, the lights, the music, it all seems to be in place. But behind the curtain, there's another story. People are moving, props are being shifted, scenes are being prepared. The audience may not see it, but the work is happening. And when the time is right, the curtain opens and everything is revealed. That's how God works in our lives. Behind the scenes, He is arranging things, positioning the right people, aligning circumstances, preparing you for the promise. Joseph had no idea what was happening behind the scenes when he was sold into slavery. He didn't know that being thrown into prison was actually part of God's divine setup. From the outside, it looked like his life was falling apart, but behind the scenes, God was aligning everything perfectly. At the right time, in one moment, he was lifted from the prison to the palace. What seemed like a series of unfortunate events was actually a divine plan unfolding. So often, we base our faith on what we can see. If we don't see progress, we assume nothing is changing. But faith is about trusting when we don't see. Just because the answer hasn't shown up yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. God is working in ways you can't imagine. He's softening hearts, shifting circumstances, opening doors you haven't even knocked on yet. Just like a seed buried in the soil, growth happens before it's visible. The roots are forming, the foundation is being laid, the structure is being built, but none of it is seen until the right moment. If you give up too soon, you'll miss what's already in motion. Don't let the silence fool you. Just because you don't see the whole picture doesn't mean the story isn't being written. God knows exactly what He's doing, and when the time is right, everything He's been working on behind the scenes will come to light. When life gets difficult, when prayers seem unanswered, when obstacles feel insurmountable, it's easy to let go of the promise God placed in your heart. Doubt whispers, maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe I heard wrong. Maybe it's time to settle for less. But when God gives you a promise, it is not dependent on circumstances, delays, or opposition. What He has spoken over your life is already set in motion. The key is to hold on, even when nothing looks like it's changing. Abraham was given a promise that he would be the father of many nations. Yet year after year passed and there was no child. His circumstances contradicted the promise. He was getting older and his wife Sarah was barren. Everything in the natural told him it was impossible. But the Bible says that he did not waver in unbelief, but was fully persuaded that God was able to do what He had promised. He understood that delays do not mean denial, that what looked impossible to him was still possible with God. And because he held on to the promise, despite all odds, Isaac was born. So often, people let go too soon. They start strong, believing, declaring, standing in faith, but when time passes and there's no sign of change, they shrink back. They allow discouragement to convince them that maybe the promise wasn't real, that maybe they misheard, that maybe they were hoping for too much. But God is not limited by time. He does not forget His promises. If He said it, He will do it. Joseph had dreams of greatness, but before he ever saw them fulfilled, he faced betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. Everything in his life seemed to contradict what God had shown him. But Joseph refused to let go of the promise. He didn't allow circumstances to dictate his faith. And because he held on, in one divine moment, he went from the prison to the palace. The very dream that seemed so far away became his reality. What God has promised you may not have happened yet, but that doesn't mean it's not coming. Just because there's resistance doesn't mean it won't happen. Just because it's taking longer than expected doesn't mean it's been forgotten. Your promise is still alive. God is faithful to complete what He started. The delay is not a denial, it's preparation. What He's doing behind the scenes is greater than what you can see right now. Hold on when it gets tough. Hold on when doubt tries to creep in. Hold on when nothing seems to be changing. God's promise is stronger than your circumstance, and in the right time, in the right way, He will bring it to pass. There are moments in life when everything feels heavy, when the challenges seem relentless, the prayers seem unanswered, and the breakthrough seems nowhere in sight. It's in these moments that discouragement tries to take root, whispering, "It's never going to change. You're always going to be stuck. It's too late." But what you must remember is this: the darkest hour always comes just before the dawn. The struggle intensifies not because you are losing, but because you are on the verge of something greater. Think about how the night works. The sky is at its absolute darkest right before the sun rises. If you didn't know the dawn was coming, you might assume that the darkness would last forever. But just when it seems like there is no light in sight, the first streaks of morning break through. The same is true in life. The moments that feel the hardest, the times when you want to quit, when nothing makes sense, when the pressure is the greatest, are often signs that you are closer to your breakthrough than ever before. Before a baby is born, the labor pains become the most intense right before delivery. The mother experiences the greatest discomfort just before she holds her child in her arms. If she gave up in the middle of labor, she would never see the promise fulfilled. The pain is not a sign of defeat. It's proof that new life is about to come forth. The same principle applies in your spiritual journey. The pressure you feel is not meant to break you. It's preparing you for what's next. Joseph spent years in a dark season before he stepped into his destiny. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, wrongfully imprisoned. Imagine how he must have felt in that prison cell, waiting, wondering if his dream would ever come to pass. But what he didn't know was that his darkest hour was just before his breakthrough. In one moment, he went from the prison to the palace. What seemed like endless suffering was actually setting him up for the fulfillment of his destiny. Many people give up right before the breakthrough comes. They let the weight of the struggle convince them that the promise is too far away. But what if the very thing you're facing right now is the final step before your breakthrough? What if this season of waiting, of pressure, of uncertainty is actually the proof that you are standing on the edge of something amazing? You may be walking through the darkest part of the night, but don't lose hope. Just because you can't see the light yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. The sunrise is already written into your story. Keep believing, keep standing, keep pressing forward, because the darkest hour always comes right before the dawn. Faith is not about having all the answers. It's not about seeing every step clearly or knowing exactly how things will work out. Faith is about moving forward even when nothing makes sense, trusting that God is working even when you can't see it. Faith is a journey, and the key is to keep walking. There will be seasons when you don't feel strong, when doubt tries to creep in, when circumstances tell you it's impossible. But faith is not based on feelings, it's based on trust. Abraham was given a promise that he would be the father of many nations, yet for years nothing happened. The Bible says he did not waver through unbelief, but was strengthened in faith. giving glory to God. He didn't stop believing just because the promise was delayed. He kept walking, kept trusting, kept standing firm, and at the appointed time, God fulfilled what He had spoken.